Hello everybody, this is Girthquake here, and today we're going to be going over my one fish bossing showcase. This is a build meant to be able to one fish almost any boss in the game. Obviously the ones with some sort of immune phases or healing or what have you, they can't be one fished, but anybody that's just a solid health bar, it can do it. It is not 100% min-maxed for bossing. You can also use it in mobbing, and we'll go over that too. Now, the overall setup is not very different from my Anti Material Ordnance Knight build. Really the only difference is the change in action skills, so you can continuously spam your Slippy grenades. So first off, the Slippy is the star of the show. I recommend a nuke roll because of the extra damage and radius. That radius does a lot more than you realize because you get extra hits that wouldn't normally touch that boss. The Slippy does merge into 3 fish. Bosses do move. Sometimes hits don't happen. This helps increase consistency of the damage you're applying on top of getting a damage boost. If you can't find a nuke roll, I would recommend a crit chance roll or charge roll. Charge roll is also great because obviously you don't have to one fish the boss if you're going for efficiency. If you're actually just going for the speed of the kill, you want to throw more fish. You can throw more than one. The one fish is just a gimmick. So charge is great too. For the enhancement, there's not a lot we can do for melee or ordnance. However, Jolt's Dude found this lovely little interaction where Transfuser will actually transfer your gun's dot when you are holding a Malawan weapon that matches the element of the dot. So if you hold a Malawan weapon with a big fat shock dot, it will transfer double that dot. I've been doing some testing with this and it transfers double the dot to anybody this effect hits. It's surprisingly potent when you are holding a large dot weapon such as a Stellium. And making it even stronger, that dot transfer does get your on-shot bonuses here. So you see that gun damage passive, that increases your gun's dot damage because it's an on-shot bonus. Normal gun damage is not an on-shot bonus. I'd like to clarify that. Enhancement gun damage is the special one. Now, the gun splash damage passive you see there is also a little funny because that passive applies to almost all damage you deal. And the almost is only there because there are a few exceptions overall, but for about 98% of the damage you deal, it will apply. So that's just 25% extra soup. So this is about as good a passive as you're going to get for the type of setup that we're doing since it has so little support among gear. The shield, Protean Cell. This is a direct 40% increase to your damage. Typically, bonus damage doesn't do exactly what you would think because it doesn't proc an effect or it doesn't get this soup or whatever. Protean is unique in the sense that it adopts the source of whatever it's applying to, gets those buffs, and it can also behave like it. So Protean will actually trigger Blackout and Tail of the Comet. And then on top of it, the Protean bonus damage will then apply to the dots that it just created. It's a direct 40% increased damage to your entire setup after slamming. Very, very potent. The class mod. The class mod is probably the biggest difference from my Anti-Material Ordnance build other than the actual action skill we're using. The action skill is axes instead of Scourge. But the class mod is to boost Blackout or Tail of the Comet depending on the boss that you are fighting. And because Blackout doesn't actually have 5 points, so obviously you want as many as you can get from the class mod. Rep kit. This one is about as good as it's going to get for this setup. You can also use a triple bypass with either of these passives, really would do fine. This is for, min-maxing those one fishes because gimmick, cherry picking and all. All damage dealt is a double dipper that will apply to the fish and then apply to your dots as well. Hard hitter is just a bunch of soup for the fish. And then real quick to go over the firmware, Action Fist here, that's melee damage. Real Big Fist, melee damage. God Killer is soup for bosses. Get Thrown, soup for your fish. And then I've got a debuff Jacob's Pistol here. That's all it really needs. It doesn't need to be a 7 cents. Stellium, like I said, big fat dot, 31,103 shock dot. That will transfer around double that. That is an enormous dot, and since we are spec'd into electrical fire, you get half of that as a fire dot. Getting right into the skill tree, discombobulate, melee crit chance on the fish, great for Blackout. I have 1 point in Gut Punch. I get 2 from my class mod. The 1 point specifically I pulled from Wield the Storm. You could pull it from Titanium Knuckles too. It doesn't really make a difference. It's soup versus soup. I actually haven't tested if that 7% is the difference in an extra tick or not. I will say that, to be clear. I don't feel like testing it. That's anyway, the 1 point is for when I switch off to a tail comp. But yeah, 4 points there for duration and for damage. That helps with the one-shots. Melee damage for the fish, skill damage for Tail of the Comet, specifically Blackout and Electrical Fire, do not get the skill damage. Forged in Steel is very important here because we're using Protean, and most bosses manage to get a hit or two in on you before you can finish your Rain Dance. Forged in Steel puts a stop to that. On top of that, if you notice, occasionally I get up in their face and I throw a fish at the ground. This allows you to do that. There's a technique to that as well, because you can create extra hits quickly by shoving the fish into corners. So the best way to do that is get up in that corner yourself and shove the fish into it. 1 point here for Overshield. Ancient Rune discovered that Protean Cell will actually take a hit out of the Overshield before it takes it from you. Now this isn't make or break here, it's just a little bit of gravy to maybe help you survive. If you really don't give a shit about it, you could, I guess, put it in one of these if you want to fill Wield the Storm out or something like that. Anyway, Catastrophe is skill crit and crit chance. This is an excellent skill. Love it. Crackling Aegis behaves like a double dipper, isn't, pretends it is, because you get the ordnance damage on the fish and then you get the status damage on the dots. Judgment normally wouldn't be doing too much, but if you think about the concept that we're doing here, one fish, the fish will continue bouncing and the boss will be below 50% health. So you get a little bit extra soup on him. Not huge, but you gotta move down the tree anyway. And I guess you could do Fists of Stone too, but that isn't really make or break either. One or the other. I went for one fish, so that's why I did this. Electrical Fire gives you a half fire dot on your shock dots or vice versa. I like to use it with shock dots because shock dots are higher damage, shorter duration. There is no duration scaling funniness with Electrical Fire, so you get 5-second duration with half that damage in fire dot. It's an excellent boon to shock dots. This is where the difference lies. This is skill crit after dealing melee damage. The fish is melee damage. That means you get 40% skill crit after dealing melee damage. Skill crit is actually double, so that's 80% crit damage, which is more or less 80% soup. Axe and Stone for regenning your grenades. Use this in conjunction with tripwire. So moving on to Blue Tree. Scorch Kairos for ordnance damage. Tail of the Comet for the double dip dot. Machinist to get your grenades back while you're mobbing. And then this was to move down the tree. This helps with the application of Tail of the Comet. And then, like I said, I don't actually have 5 points in this because I need Axe and Stone to be able to mob with this build. However, you equip a comm and get it to 8 out of 5 for 120% double dip, and Blackout gets kind of crazy. So that is the skill tree. Specializations. Amon loves them. They go a long way on this setup. I'm sorry to console bros that you're going to have to farm for a little bit for this one, because frag payload is there, and yeah. So getting into it, the one that you can swap out is Contamination. This isn't needed. This helps min-max for the boss one-shots. You can swap it out for now with Caffeine when you're mobbing to get your axes back, which will in turn get your grenades back through Tripwire. Tripwire combines with Axe and Stone for a nice little boost in ordnance regen. The best defense, all damage dealt, that's a double dipper for your dots, your ordnance, and all that. Now to the star of this show. Fragmentation payload is cursed. Applies like normal crit damage, like you would expect, but twice as much. And then it also multiplies your skill crit. Skill crit normally gets 2 times damage. So that 40% I showed you in Tree, for example, with Executioner would actually be 80% skill crit, or crit damage total, sorry. The addition of Fragmentation payload makes that 2 a 3. So instead of being 80% crit damage, it becomes 120% crit damage. And if you remember, we also have Catastrophe present as well, which applies to that. So fragmentation payload, whenever you are relying on ordnance crits, is a necessity for damage. Just take it. Now, that is assuming you have skill crit to buff. If you have no skill crit, it's not popping off. It's not going crazy. It's not doing much of anything other than giving you 100% crit damage like you would expect. So that is basically the must-have from the specializations, and why I gotta apologize to the console bros, because you gotta get over all that. One last thing to go over, if you were wondering what the specific rain dance was for this, how to deal this damage, and you like to just hear it be explained, the way it goes down is you want to throw out your forward skill for your immunity, jump while doing that, slam your way back down. When you slam, that will activate your protein cell. You will have just a few seconds of immunity to throw a fish into a crevice somewhere on the boss. If he has an armpit, if he has a large foot, if he has 2 feet stuck together, you want that fish to bounce off the ground and off the boss's hitbox multiple times. You don't want to debuff first if you are using a debuff and then swapping to your splash weapon. You actually want to debuff after the hit, because the big thing here is you don't want to steal an electrical fire proc. So what you do is make sure that your fish are the very first thing to hit. Now you can't control if that fish with the protein bonus damage applies a shock dot. However, if you are lucky enough it doesn't apply a shock dot before the blackout dot is applied, you get a big fat fire dot from electrical fire. At which point you hit it with the debuff and then swap to your splash damage Stellium. Now that was really only necessary for Backhive and Timekeeper. Everybody else, and Radix, Radix needed a debuff. Everybody else could just be one fish, no issues. There's plenty of damage. That is the rain dance and how to. If you were wondering how all this stuff is figured out, if you want to come by and ask some questions and pick my brain, if you want to talk to any other content creators that you may have questions for, if you just want to show me pictures of your pets, stop by my Discord. There's an invite in the description. Anybody is welcome, of any skill level, any intelligence level. You don't have to be a super genius to come be a scientist. All you got to do is enjoy the game. That's it. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.